Started. I don't want to keep everyone, we want to make sure we kind of stay on schedule. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Very happy to have all of you here. And my name is Lisa Ferguson. I'm the Director of Admissions at Deer Hollow Recovery in Draper, Utah. My coworker, Ricky, with the Philadelphia hat on, is outside somewhere. But he's also our one of our business development employees, so we work closely together. I just wanted to kind of give everyone a brief overview about Deer Hollow. Yes, I'm so sorry. Here.
Thank you.
Just a brief overview about Deer Hollow. It's not really why we're here, but we're kind of hosting this event, and so want to give you a little idea of what we do. So basically, we are a residential treatment center for PTSD and trauma. We also have a full continuum of care with outpatient programming as well. But our focus really, especially for me, is on our residential treatment. We do have a substance abuse license. We also have a mental health license, but 100% of our programming is geared towards PTSD and trauma. So we basically treat addiction or substance abuse as a behavior that our clients are using to cope with, or in an unhealthy way, or maybe numb some of their unresolved trauma or grief or loss, whatever it might be. So we're not a 12-step program at all, although all of us believe wholeheartedly in 12-step programs. That's not what our focus is. It's a very, very intensive treatment program. So it's a minimum stay of 35 days and 7 days a week of programming, about 35 hours a week of group trauma therapy. They meet with their individual therapist once a week, and our medical director is a psychiatrist. They meet with her once a week as well. But I think mostly what I want you all to know for your purposes is that we are, we're not for everyone. We're very thorough in our screening process. So if a client is coming to us, they really truly do have to have enough insight and enough stability to work our program. So if somebody has severe medical issues, it's not, we can't deal with that. It's not what we do. And we really do tend to focus on what we do best. So we will always help find a client another option, but we're very specific about what we do and the people we bring in. We don't want to set anyone up to fail. They've had enough of that. They're in very, scary places, the majority of them. So we don't take everyone. But the people that we do take, I'll say, in most cases have very significantly improved outcomes when they leave. They leave with skills to help them kind of cope with the symptoms that they've been experiencing, and just, I think more than anything, a lot of hope. I know I speak to the majority of the clients, especially the ones that come to residential treatment, before they come, and that's what I hear most of all. It's just a sense of hopelessness. So I guess what I want to impart is that there is hope for these clients that are suffering from PTSD and trauma. I say often that, especially to the clients, that you're not broken, you're wounded. Just like if it was a physical injury, this PTSD and PTSI, it's an injury, and there's help for that. So that's what we do. And we are an allowed, they call it L&I, work comp provider in the state of Washington. So we do get a lot of clients from Washington State. And we have had a couple clients come through Deer Hollow with work comp claims in Idaho. And what we found is that the clients are having some difficulty. That's a new law. And so what the purpose of this group is to we've brought experts to talk to you about their experience and help you have a better understanding of how to progress through that if you have somebody you're working with who you think needs to file a work comp claim. So I'm not going to talk a lot because obviously I'm not very good at this, but I just want to again thank you for being here. There are resources. The other thing I just want to again just kind of reiterate is that we're not for everyone, but we work with a lot of treatment centers. We will get your person help if they're willing. If it's not with us, we will find another option or alternative for them. And that's our most important goal, is to make sure that everyone gets the help that they need. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie. And again, I'm sorry, you have to come and sit in the hot seat when you're talking. Turn it over to Jackie. Most all of you know her Courageous Survival, and let her do her thing.
Hi. Hey, Ken. My name is Jackie Briggs, and I'm the director of Courageous Survival. We are an LLC, but we're working on setting up a nonprofit. We specialize in connecting first responders, veterans, and military members and their spouses with mental health and wellness resources. And before I get too much into what we do, I just wanted to say a couple more things about Deer Hollow. I want to thank Lisa and Ricky for hosting this and putting this together. I think this is great. We've been doing a lot of work together behind the scenes over the last year and a half involving the post-traumatic stress injury law in Idaho since it passed July 1st, 2019. And there's been a lot of people involved in it. Professional Firefighters of Idaho, FOP have led the way in a lot of that, and we've jumped in and partnered with them. And so I'm excited about what's happening. And so I wanted to thank Deer Hollow. Thank you guys. Also wanted to let you guys know, one of the really cool things about Deer Hollow is that they have a great alumni program. And then they also have a first responder and veteran liaison who is a former retired law enforcement officer and a Marine Corps veteran, Jared Nesri. He is awesome. He is a great resource. He was actually one of the very first cases in Washington that processed through workers' comp for PTSD. And when we were lobbying in spring of 2019, we actually used a lot of the data from his case, and I worked with the attorneys that represented him, and they will be working with us as well, and the alliance of attorneys that you will meet one of them, the one Clinton Miner. He's going to be shepherding our alliance here in Idaho, so that when people do need the help for post-traumatic stress injury claims, the law was written in a way that you shouldn't need that, but when you do, we will be prepared with a group that that can help you and help your clients. So anyway, I just wanted to thank them for Jared for that, and then Putnam, Dustin Daly at Putnam, Potvin and Daly, and they're awesome in Washington State. So we'll be doing some work with them. Okay, so a little bit about who I am. So my husband is a retired not retired yet. He will be in a year with Ada County Sheriff's Office. He's been with them for 27 and a half years. He's also a Marine Corps veteran. We have 4 daughters, 2 of which are suicide attempt survivors. So our family has literally lived Idaho being 50th for mental health and wellness resources. When our youngest was 16, 6 years ago, and had her suicide attempt, there was nobody in the whole Pacific Northwest that would take her because she had too much layered trauma and she was too suicidal. And so we had to fight for resources, and we got a huge miracle, got her into a facility, and it helped her, and she's doing well now. In fact, I'm a grandma. So I'm super excited about that. So once we got out of survival mode, we wanted to turn around and really help others to find the resources, because I really think that Idaho can start leading the way and with resources, because there's a lot more resources that people don't know about. It's just a matter of connecting them together and then working together, collaboration. And that's one of the things that I also love about Deer Hollow, is that they're collaborating a lot with a lot of different, she mentioned treatment facilities. If it's not the right facility for you, then they will help you find the right resource. And then for aftercare, they help find resources to connect people to, so that they can land safely when they come home as well. So I'm really grateful for them. So Courageous Survival, we have a resource guide. This is on our website. It's 20 pages, and it's awesome with all different types of resources, from crisis lines specific to first responders and veterans, therapists that have been vetted, treatment facilities, treatment programs, retreats, equine therapy, alternative treatments, neurofeedback, peer support groups, community groups, all different kinds of businesses, nonprofits that we work with. For example, we work closely with 911 at Ease and Next Rung, and they will pay for therapy for a first responder and their spouse and their children at no cost. And you don't have to go through EAP, you don't have to go through insurance. So any of those therapists, if you guys are interested, please get a hold of us and let us know, because we can connect you with 911 at Ease. One of their Idaho representative is actually one of our members of our peer support team. And so it's really great, like I said, all the collaborations that are happening. And then besides the resource guide, and that is, by the way, available on our website, we have printed copies that we hand out, probably 300 to 400 copies that we have handed out each quarter over the last year. And it's also all online with hyperlinks. And then we update that continually, and you can download a copy of that resource guide as well. We have peer support teams. Thanks to Code 3 to 1, Retired Law Enforcement Association and American Legion, who came to us and said, hey, we want to form peer support teams. Can you help us? We ultimately decided to create peer support teams, and then and they are volunteering for us. So we have about 25 peer support members. We have an active first responders peer support team that helps agencies that don't have peer support, or maybe larger agencies that have peer support, but maybe people want a little bit more anonymity. We can help fill in the gaps with that. Retired first responders, which there is nothing before now, active military and veterans, as well as spouses or significant others. And all of the peer support is confidential. They've all been trained in suicide prevention, crisis intervention, and a lot of other trainings. So we've got, gosh, I can't tell you how many years of experience I have with, especially my retired first responders. They bring a lot of expertise and wisdom and empathy and compassion and just knowledge to the table. And so they are here for you guys to utilize and work with as well. So thank you guys for that. And there's a bunch of them here because we will be working with therapists and with attorneys like Clinton to help support when someone is reaching out for help. If our peer support members know about the law, know about what's going on with it, then they can better help the first responder and direct them to the right resources. So I actually have about 10 of them in attendance here. So thank you guys very much for coming. I appreciate that very much. So, and then one of the things that you guys will be receiving is a copy of the law itself, so that you guys can get familiar with it. And Ari will talk a little bit more about that later. It's also accessible on our website. We have a legislation page on our website. If you go to www.courageoussurvival.com and hit the Idaho legislation page, you can find that information. There's also information on a catastrophic injury for public safety officers as well, which I believe that Clinton will mention a little bit about, that passed this last year and has been updated so that when officers are needing help for PTSI, but they aren't quite able to go back to work, and maybe they need to look at retraining or maybe being medically retired, there are resources there for those people. So we want to make sure that we are knowledgeable and are able to help you guys understand that, as well as the first responders and people that work with them. So, and then I wanted to mention before I hand over to, who's going next? Okay, Clinton is going next. One of the great things that I get to work with is Elevate Mind Body Studios, and that's actually where we are at right now. They have a fitness gym as well as a wellness center, which is just state of the art. I used to do 2-day mental health and wellness trainings all across the United States for first responders and veterans and their spouses for about 2 years, and I would always go into an area and look for resources like Elevate, and I could never find any. I was lucky to find float centers, but these guys have float pods, sensory deprivation pods, wellness cocoon saunas, red light, pain light, Himalayan salt room with halo therapy. These are just a few of the modalities that they have here. And so please get in touch with me. Let me know. On the 11th of every month, we have a free service. One of those is free for first responders, veterans, and their spouses. On 9/11, we do everything free, and we have a big resource fair that Dear Hollow comes up and is a part of as well, and a lot of other resources. We have breathwork technique workshops, just a lot of collaborating and great stuff going on coming up here soon. So You can also reach out to me anytime. We do VIP tours, and we meet with actually between 1 and 5 different first responders or veterans each week down here at Elevate. We're able to give them a VIP tour and give them a pass that's worth over $300 worth of services so that they can try them out and see if any of those work for them. And then if they do, there's no strings attached, but if they do, then they offer 50% or more off of pricing for these guys. And so it's pretty awesome to be able to have this resource. And I'll tell you just briefly about one of them, the float pods, if you've not been familiar with them. Sensory deprivation pods, it's a private pod, like a little pool that is enclosed. Now, for those who are more claustrophobic, you can leave it open a little bit. If you need to, you can leave the blue light on, you can have meditation music or nature sounds going on, or you can have the full sensory deprivation and go all black and relax. It's a 50-minute session. It's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt. You float in it, you're totally buoyant. It's the same temperature as your body, so you lose that sense of where your body stops and the water starts, and it takes all the pressure off of your muscles and joints. I've had veterans that had chronic pain for 11 and a half years and tell me that they had relief for the first time in that long. I have one that drives over an hour because he said it's his only relief from chronic pain and PTSD. Another one of my veterans, he was on 17 different meds and 2 suicide attempts, totally angry, withdrawn. And he went to a really awesome program called Save a Warrior, came back from that and started floating twice a week. And he is off all his meds. He's going back to school, working full time, engaged to be married. And so there's some really great resources, not to just help people trying to survive, but to give them their life back and help them to thrive with their life. So I'm honored that we get to work with them. So I'm gonna kind of pause right there because that was a lot of information, and hand over to Clinton Miner.
I'm Clinton Miner. I have been an attorney in Idaho for 33 years. The author of the changes in the statute that allowed for first responders was one of my colleagues that I worked with in the early part of my practice. His name is Brad Iden. He is an incredible lawyer, another resource, and I'm in the process of putting together a list of attorneys in the area. I'm not trying to drum business as much as I am trying to get opportunities for folks. The statute's interesting. In 1994, we changed the statute to allow some psychological injury for all individuals. But we have, we in the work comp talk about physical psych injuries, psych physical injuries, and psych injuries. Physical psych injury would be I lose my arm, and because of it I'm devastated and I can't psychologically recover from that. I have a physical injury that precipitates the psychological issues. Those are fairly easily covered. The insurance companies understand that kind of a situation. The law says very specifically that you have to have a physical injury. So if it's a pure psych, that's the other end of the spectrum. Someone who just has purely psychological issues. Idaho's workers' compensation statute for non-first responders says you're out of luck. It also says you're covered by workers' compensation, so you can't sue your employer, but you can't sue them under tort. You can't get any money out of workers' compensation. You're just out of luck. It's a tough situation, and we've got some cases we're trying to push right now. The middle one of psych physical, a lot of practitioners, including myself, have been able to go into the insurance companies and say, do you really want to push this issue? Do you really want this to go up and see how dumb the whole thing is written? My person can't sleep. They have tremors. You folks know better than I, the physical manifestations that true psychological injuries can have. And with that, in other words, a psych physical situation, we've been able to help people get benefits under workers' compensation. Now, that's not why you're here, but it gives you some background on where the first responders law came from. First responders were coming in and saying, hey, there's no doubt that I've dealt with issues that cause significant problems in my life. And have I got to show something physical to get a benefit out of that? And our legislature, after a lot of pushing, said no to the police officers, and then ultimately, no, you don't have to show that to all first responders. They said Oh, one last thing, in the non-first responders law, you also have to show that the injury is the predominant cause of the psychological problems. So that's a whole other thing, because typically people have got baggage they came with, and when they lose that arm, you got to convince everybody that that baggage isn't what's causing the issues of psychological injury. It's the actual injury. One last thing I'll tell about both sides, and that is it has to be clear and convincing evidence, and I'll talk about that a little more specifically. In the first responders law, it's very different. It says, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it, post-traumatic stress injury suffered by a first responder is a compensable injury or occupational disease, and those are some terms of art that we don't need to get into in 10 minutes, when the following conditions are met. And it basically says an examination by a psychologist, a psychiatrist or a psychiatrist duly licensed in the area of practice. So both of them have to be licensed. One other thing that happens in first responders that other people can't have, and that is a counselor who has been trained in post-traumatic stress injury can also diagnose, can evaluate and diagnose. You have to actually have a psychologist or a psychiatrist if you're not a first responder. A counselor with training in PTSI or PTSD can do that evaluation. So that's a significant thing that is there. So I don't know who I'm talking to, but that is, in my mind, very significant. The other thing is there's no predominant cause issue. And the last thing it says is, if I can find the actual language, it says no compensation shall be paid. No, that's not the one. Basically, it says instead of a single incident, it can be a, oh, here it is. Post-traumatic stress injury was caused by an event or events arising out of and in the course of the first responder's employment. So as opposed to a non-first responder who has to say, this is the event and it's the predominant cause. So I've got, all of my eggs in that basket. A first responder can say, I had a precipitating event. This is what caused it. And it can be a pile of other things that happen on the job that really brings it up. The two people that I've talked to so far, that is exactly the situation. They have a horrendous precipitating event that then a flood comes in from all of the other horrendous things that they've dealt with as a first responder. And the statute recognizes that as per first responders, that's appropriate. Now, there is one little catch in that, and that is, it says, the last section says, all of these benefits become effective for first responders with the date of injury or manifestation of occupational disease after July 1st, 2019. So the way I would approach that as a practitioner, as an attorney, I would say, if we've got the last event after 2019, the baggage comes with it. Or if the last event was in 2017, let's make it a little, the last few weeks of 2018, and it wasn't until August of 2019 or sometime in 2021 when the other stresses of life or 2020 when we were all, whatever, that's when it precipitates. That's when the situation manifests itself. And with occupational disease, it doesn't really manifest itself until a practitioner names it. So I can have carpal tunnel, and I know I've got carpal tunnel. Everybody, when they've got carpal tunnel, they'll know they've got carpal tunnel. And I can tell somebody, I think I've got carpal tunnel. I can tell my boss, I think I've got carpal tunnel. But until a doctor says I have carpal tunnel, it is not manifest. And that's the approach I would take as far as this too. If you've got that pile of things, I would say the manifestation date is when somebody puts a label on it and explains where it came from. So that 2019 date is a tough one for some of the cases that you'll be dealing with, but it isn't insurmountable, and tilting windmills is what comp practitioners do for a living. A couple of things I want to share with you. My practice, when a person comes to see me about workers' compensation and they sit down across the table from me and we go through their case, and there's a long spiel that I could give you that I would give them. But the one thing I tell them is, if they don't need an attorney at that point, probably the number's gone down because adjusters have gotten tougher and tougher, but probably 20%, 30% of the people that come into my office, I say, you're going to need an attorney. You are going to have to fight this, but you don't want me in yet. Call me, treat me as though I'm your attorney. If you end up hiring somebody else, I'm not going to be offended, but let me walk you through the process. And I'll say that same thing to you as people assisting these people who've been, these first responders who've been injured. If you've got somebody that's having problems, feel free to call me and I will try and help you figure out how to get those bills paid without having to send your client or your patient to me. That part of the first part of the case, babysitting medical treatment, makes no money for me, but I am happy to help with it for two reasons. One of those is it's part of what I signed up to do. The second thing, and probably most importantly, is that I find that if I shepherd medical treatment, I have a lot better case when we get to the end. So it's, there's a little bit of altruism in me, but there's also some capitalist in me. So I balance those. And if you've got questions, if you've got cases that you're having a hard time getting the comp carriers to pay, feel free to call me. If we have to, either I or one of the attorneys that we're putting together across the state will jump in and actually fight the fight. But let's try and backdoor the situation as much as we can. There was one more thing I was going to tell you, and it must have been a lie. So, and I'll be around after if you have any questions. So is there anything that I can help with at this point?
Anybody have any questions for Clint?
I'll move out of the.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
A little bit of musical chairs. Sorry, let me adjust that again. Hi, everyone. I'm Ari Brooks. I'm the mental health director with Emergency Responders Health Center in Boise. Emergency Responders Health Center has been around for quite a while. It's an occupational and primary care, family care medical facility for first responders in Boise. About a year ago, we opened up a mental health wing of that clinic, which has been a really fun journey. We do have a lot of other services as well, but because today's focus is on how to manage some of the maybe more complicated aspects of submitting claims and understanding PTSI claims for first responders, I kind of want to just jump into that. I wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the things that Clinton mentioned. So thank you for kind of starting some of that. One thing that I really want to make sure we focus on is documentation, right? So for the clinicians on board out there, and for anyone else interested, we have to document everything we do in our medical records, right? And that's going to be the main tool for setting a first responder up to have their claim accepted, right? Backing up just a little bit, in our clinic, typically what happens is a first responder will come either to me as a mental health counselor, or they'll show up in the office of one of our medical providers. And they'll say, this is what's going on. And if that looks like to us as providers that it equates PTSD or PTSI, we're making that diagnosis and we're clearly documenting these are the PTSD symptoms per the DSM, and this is how they are directly related to that precipitating event, right? So this happened on this day, and then this first responder has all of these symptoms because of that. Now, if it's a cumulative situation, we're noting that too. Here's the precipitating last straw event, and this person has a long history, including many of these other things. So you end up with a date of injury and the event itself, but it doesn't necessarily mean the only thing you're working on then in treatment is just the one then it kind of opens you up to working on all of the things that have been precipitating or that have led to that event. Now, I think my understanding is that in the community, it's been difficult for mental health providers to get claims approved. And I think that's one of the reasons. It's not always very clear that the two are connected, the PTSD symptoms and the event. So I would encourage that. On that note, one thing I always tell first responders who are thinking of, or we may be encouraging to submit a claim for PTSI, would be your medical records are open for review by whichever agency, such as Corvell or State Insurance Fund or Intermountain. They're going to look at all of them. So not just what I'm writing right now, but they, at some point in the future, might have reason to pull all of your past records. So you just need to know that going in. That does not mean those records go to that person's workplace, which I think is an important distinction, right? So maybe I've got a police officer from Boise and they're working with Corvell, that's the agency that manages their claims. Corvell is going to have access to each and every note that I write. Boise police is not. So there is that amount of confidentiality around that. I know a lot of first responders are reluctant to file PTSI claims for that reason. How confidential is it? It's a great question. We here at, or with ERHC where I work, we always have a medical provider and a mental health provider assess and come to the same conclusion, right, for PTSI, PTSD. It's per the legislation not required, right? It does say that you just need to have a psychiatrist, psychologist, or master's level counselor with training in PTSD treatment. I don't have a lot of, maybe you have better data. I don't have a lot of data on how that's working out with just the counselors. I do know that since we opened our mental health doors about a year ago, we've had 11 PTSI claims. We've had 10 accepted, only 1 denied. So I think the system of 2.
I'll talk about that.
Jackie has some data. She's good. Awesome. Thank you. And so my recommendation is if you can work with a medical provider who has standing and background in treating first responders, probably going to work out better if that's what your first responder wants, right? I work in-house with our medical providers, so it's all under one roof. Of course, if you're working in the community, you need to have releases and such in place. On that note, one kind of roadblock for first responders that we see come up is, they'll show up to our medical provider, they'll say, like, these are the symptoms, I think it's PTSD. Our provider will say, like, why don't we go ahead and submit that workers' comp claim? But then there's a lot of radio silence with the provider in the community for a lot of reasons. And so we're hoping to break down those barriers so that we can have a really quick and efficient discussion, make sure we're all on the same page, make sure it does actually look like PTSI, and then get it all submitted to workers' comp quickly together. The different workers' comp agencies get a little bit squirrely if it's been a couple of weeks and the complaints that it's an incomplete submission. I wanted to note, so there's been a lot of question by first responders about, like, what kind of assessment do I need to have then? There's different levels of assessment for PTSI. So I work in the Boise area, so I'm mostly working with first responders in the Boise area. And with the exception of Ada County, a first responder really just needs to work with one of these outpatient clinicians like myself. Ada County has their own special process where they have 3 designated psychologists, psychiatrists, for whom all of their first responders under whom they have to be evaluated. It's a longer process. We're hoping that Ada County will consider change on that front, but for now, just know that if you have someone coming in working for like the sheriff's office, their people do have to go through these 3 providers, and nothing against the providers per se, but it's a long process and they're all male, and so that can be a barrier, especially if you have a female first responder. Let's see here. The typical course of treatment, in my experience, takes one of two paths. So you've got first responders who are coming in with something fairly acute. You know, this one thing happened last week. I am not sleeping now, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe we, take them off of work for a couple of weeks. They get some treatment, maybe do some EMDR, and then they're back to work, right? I was looking back at the average number of sessions for the cases that we've worked with, and about half of them had like 5 to 7 sessions, and the other half had like 35 sessions or 40 sessions. And those are more the people who are dealing with the chronic overload, the cumulative stress of many, many years. There's much that could be said about that track. I don't know if today is the day we're going into that.
Sometimes, so whatever you feel like.
Okay.
Important, yeah.
I'll note some things on that then. So at times, first responder will be deemed like they need to not be going to work because it's exacerbating their symptoms to a certain point that they really can't do the job. Another benefit of working with a medical provider like we are is they put in that work clearance with their agency. It's the only piece of information that goes to the agency. So-and-so is not medically cleared to return to work at this time, or they're cleared to return to administrative work only, or light duty, or whatever, right? Something like that. And in that way, this person, the first responder, is off of work, and then they're getting whatever intensity of treatment for PTSD they need. Now, if that goes on beyond a certain point, maybe months, that the workers' comp agency, such as State Insurance Fund or Prevail, can request what's called an independent medical examination. And
That's not
that's,
what we call it.
what do we call it?
We call it a defense medical examination or other things.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, come on, we want the other things.
Right. They'll tell you, the first responder, they're going to go undergo an IME. And this is typically with a psychiatrist, a neuropsychiatrist, someone who has extensive training in this area. And the first responder will spend an entire day with that doctor, that provider, determining if they've met max medical improvement, if they have the ability to return to work, if they don't, and if they have any kind of partial, usually partial impairment.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, so we have, tell me your name.
My name's Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley, I read that. So Ashley here is asking, does the severity of a person's symptoms, the PTSI, PTSD symptoms, help determine the level of clearance they have when they're, say, going back to work, correct?
Yes.
So I would say yes and no. Yes, in that, we can suggest or say this person is cleared for these kinds of things, but not these kinds of things. Probably the best example is a lot of firefighters. We'll say, well, they're cleared for everything but emergency medical calls, which is obviously the bulk of their work. But we've had firefighting agencies find meaningful work for those people. It doesn't include going out on the apparatus, maybe just for a period of time. For some permanently, they end up moving into different jobs because they still have a lot to give. They just maybe aren't going to be able to handle those kinds of calls anymore. You have to be careful with that, I think, because every first responder agency has policy behind it. I've had some agencies be just extraordinarily good to their people, and they find a way to make it work. They want to. Then there are others who are like, okay, has your FMLA run out? We're going to fire you, regardless of whether you're on workers' comp or not. So I encourage, it's difficult to put this back on a client when they're under such distress, but I try to encourage them to know a little bit about what their specific agency's HR policies are that go alongside workers' comp, so there are just fewer surprises. I think this legislation is new enough. There've been
I'll get closer so the speaker can hear me. Anyway, what I was going to say is what Clint is talking about is it basically is up to the clinician, because the law does state, according to the DSM, that the clinician is the one who gets to decide the diagnosis. and the recommendations. However, it is up to the agency what they do with that. Sub-agencies are better. Jared's agency at Yakima, they had nothing before he went. He was the first one that went through this. And so they actually ended up responding very well, and they developed a whole wellness program and supported, they had like 6 more officers, you know, as soon as he got back. And that door was open that got some help right after that. Then you've got other agencies that will find a way to let you go. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do, is educate and advocate, and so that we can get people on the same page and get them to realize it's a post-traumatic stress injury and that it can be treated and people can build resilience. There's a lot of military studies that show that if you get them back, the first responder or the military, that was the study with the military, get these soldiers back to their units, they actually recover better and build better resilience if you can get them back to their unit sooner. But obviously you need to be able to do that safely as well.
And I just, for credentialing, so again, kind of in this area, State Insurance Fund is the agency or insurance company that I work with most, and you don't need to be credentialed with them. Intermountain, again, that's Ada County, you don't need to be credentialed with them. Corval, you need to be credentialed with, and they're part of the IPN network. So if you're in network with them, you're already in that network with Corval. There's probably others throughout Idaho, but that's
kind of what happens is an employer can designate the entry door. So my wife works for Middleton School District, and their workers have to go to either St. Luke's Occupational Health or St. Alice Occupational Health. Anything that happens to anybody there have to go there, and that is communicated to them in their new employee intake process. If it isn't communicated, and my client goes wherever they go, even if that's on a policy someplace, there's a chain of command or a chain of treatment that happens. And you can't necessarily yank them out of that chain of treatment. But if you communicate from the beginning as an employer, you can lock them into a system. And that's my assumption is that's what Corval does.
Corval is the only insurance company that's ever asked me to show my qualification for treating PTSD.
Yeah, and all you, I don't think you have to, I don't think the statute said masters. It simply says
Counseling.
A counselor with training.
There you go. Masters or doctoral trained mental health provider. What does it say specifically?
It is directly written in the law of who can.
Exactly.
Is it Corval, do you have to be credentialed to file the claim or to treat?
So that's a great question. I checked with our credentialers about this just this week, and I think it's to submit claims to be reimbursed.
Okay.
Right, like you would for any treatment, you're submitting it to someone's insurance.
So do you feel like Deer Hollow would have to be credentialed? Sorry.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
all right, I'll reach out.
We can double check with them.
Okay.
But she checked on the just sort of the blanket contract that anyone under the IPN network has or signs, and it includes Corval as one of the many. Yeah.
But as far as what the law says, it is actually written in the law who can diagnose, who can submit.
As I'm reading it, it says a psychologist, a psychiatrist newly licensed to practice in the jurisdiction where the treatment is rendered, or a counselor trained in post-traumatic stress injury.
Yes.
And that last one, in fact, when I read that, it was like, that's a pretty broad. I mean, I would assume you have to have some kind of licensing or training as a counselor, but I don't know that the masters. Is there a separate section that I'm missing that talks about masters?
Yeah, that's probably my assumption.
No, it's just the wording in the law. Now, just like with working,
for example, what they're talking about is who is able to diagnose, who's able to treat. It actually states it in the law itself. So again, if you do not have a copy of that law, you need to be familiar with the law, read it, and familiarize yourself with it. But even though it doesn't say a doctor can submit and diagnose, it's very important, as what we were talking about earlier, and how Ari works with Dr. Hilvers and Dr. Wick at Emergency Responders. Clinton works with Dr. Beaver. So that would definitely be a great recommendation, is that if you don't already have a medical doctor that you work with as a clinician, that you get in touch with somebody who can assist you, because that is really important. And hopefully that helps answer some of the question.
Yeah, Beaver is not an MD. He's a neuropsychologist he's done extensive, not only training, but research in all of these areas.
For sure. Now, there's a lot of information here. Again, kind of the two different tracks, like simpler claims, much more complicated claims. I don't know, but my assumption is when the law was created, I think people thought it would be more of the simpler claims. And then to the point you made earlier, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like when the law sunsets and it goes back up or see if it's going to be renewed. Yeah, it'll be interesting. With that, questions about sort of the process that I'm involved in and that you guys want to be involved in. Yes, please.
So with females, where you have male-centric invoicing, is there some kind of option where they can go through the process with a female in a county or a town, or is there anything for this woman? I'm on the veteran side of things, I'm not on the first responder side of things, I do have first responder family. But with MST, military sexual trauma, it's men, women, and others, however they designate themselves. And it can be very difficult for a male to even see a male. So is there anything for those people?
Well, so the question for those of you listening is, because first responder culture and veterans culture is very much male-centric, and there can be things like sexual trauma, very common. What are the resources for females, for women who are first responders? And I would just say that because any counselor trained in treatment of PTSD can, can work with a first responder, seek out a female counselor, right? Seek out a female medical provider. And the kind of caveat again is Ada County, but other than that, you should be able to work with just women if you want to.
I can add to that. There's a provision in the statute that specifically provides that you can do a formal request for change of position. So if the provider, the surety is saying you've got to go to one of these three males, you can, and it's probably not something that, it would help if the lawyer was involved, but the Industrial Commission has assistants down there who help with particularly this type of thing, where you can go and say, I'm a female, my trauma is that I was sexually assaulted by one of my coworkers. I don't want to go see a man. I want a hearing on that. And they will set up a hearing and give you an audience to say whether the change of position happens or not. If it, for some reason was denied, that's an appealable issue. So that could be taken up as far as the Supreme Court, and I can guarantee you our Supreme Court would not look favorably on that situation. I just know that our court right now has enough, first of all, enough women on it, as well as some people who have a brain in their head, I guess.
It seems like only a matter of time before that's changed. Yes, great question though. Other questions? Questions from anyone on Zoom? Okay.
What is Ptsd?
I'm going to very quickly give you a primer. This is the primer I give all of my clients so they can understand the process. If I had a whiteboard, it'd help a little bit. But in workers' compensation, there's all kinds of benefits, but it really breaks down into 4 categories of benefits. By the way, I started to say that in Spanish. I speak Spanish fluently, so if that's of any assistance to any of your clients, 60–70% of my clients are Hispanic. The first benefit is medical. Medical treatment, once accepted and paid, is eternal. There is no statute of limitations on medical treatment. And that would include healthcare treatment. It's really what I should be saying as opposed to medical treatment. The counseling, all those things, as long as you can keep showing it came from this incident, the surety's on the hook forever unless they settle and close out medicals with some money. So that's the first thing. Second thing is time loss. You talked about someone needing to be away from the job for a period of time. It's a weird situation where the first week you don't get paid, you go into the second week, you start getting paid. If you go beyond 2 weeks, they go back and pick up the first week. But basically they say that first week it's, you cover it with your sick leave, and then if it goes longer than that, we realize it was more important than just sick leave. Time loss is paid at 67% of the average weekly wage of that employee. except that almost everybody we're talking about here hits a ceiling that is 90% of the average state weekly wage. So your patients and clients are going to be getting less than their regular take home unless they're police officers. The peace officer fund that covers both correctional institutions and police officers picks up the difference. In fact, I've just fought that case. They thought it was only the difference for the first year, and we just helped them understand that it was for as long as that needs to be. So, but they need to understand that if they're off work, they're going to probably lose some income. 67% is calculated on the idea that that's about what your take home is anyway, and since this is tax-free, that's going to take care of things. The other problem that happens is that benefits, unless they FMLA or have an employer that'll cover it, their benefits will go away too because they aren't still working. They may have to cover those, depends on the employer and the agency and how they handle those things. So your time loss is covered until you hit a point which is called maximum medical improvement. That's when the doc says you've plateaued, you're cured, you're plateaued, and you're not going to get any worse. At that point, then a practitioner needs to do an evaluation for impairment. And that comes out of the American Medical Association Guide to the Evaluation of Permanent Impairment, which relies very heavily on the DSM. I've practiced long enough. This is the 6th edition. I started with the 3rd, maybe the 2nd. We had one edition that had nothing for psychological. We actually, for a significant period of time, used the old edition for psychological, the new edition for everything else. This has come back out with psychological and recognize the DSM. It's a process that you have to go through some training to know how to do an impairment rating. That impairment rating is I explain to people, if I lost my thumb and a concert pianist lost their thumb the same day, we get exactly the same impairment rating. It's a generic evaluation of a body and how it is valuable to work. And different body parts are worth different things. And so we get that same impairment evaluation, and that impairment evaluation has a value of about $2,000 per percentage point. So if I lost my thumb, the thumb's worth a lot, by the way. If I lost my thumb, it'd be worth about $40,000, I think, something like that. 20–30% of my whole body is right there in that thumb. Concert pianists and I, though, have a real different scenario. And so what we look at is that percentage is a percentage of a whole person. That impairment rating is a door opener. While it has value, even if it's a 1%, or it can actually be less than 1%, it may not have a lot of value in and of itself, but it opens the door in Idaho to an evaluation of how this impacts or affects this individual. And then we look at age, education, economic circumstances of the community, personality issues, those sometimes can play a role. There's actually a case that the person was very unattractive. They said that played a role. I mean, this person was, I guess, really ugly because they talk about that. That was bad. So we got those things play a role in whether they can find a job. So you take the injury, combine it with all of those other things, and decide how much of their employability they've lost. That's called disability in excess of impairment. So the impairment's a percentage, and we're looking at how much more percentage they've lost. And we look at two things: no pain and suffering, none of those kinds of things. We look at labor market impact. How does it affect their ability to go out in the labor market? Before my thumb situation, the concert pianist not only could have been a concert pianist, but they could have been a hod carrier. They could have pushed a shovel. Now it's hard to push a shovel. I mean, they've lost those jobs as well. So labor market access, and the second one is income. And the big one is the income, but more and more over the last few years, we're looking at labor market access as well. That's usually, there are a lot of practitioners who won't even talk to your clients until they have that impairment rating. It's a lot of work to shepherd medical treatment, and it doesn't pay because I only get a percentage of what I get for people. And typically when I'm shepherding medical treatment, even if I'm getting it for them, I don't take a percentage because then they can't get the medical treatment. If I'm taking 30% or 25% of the check that pays the doctor's not going to see them. So so a lot of practitioners won't take those cases until they've got that impairment rating. I think that that's short-sighted because I get a lot better results out of the end of my case by shepherding, but whatever, that's the situation. If your patients, your clients are in a situation where they have those initial issues, they're not getting approved, or if you're having trouble getting your bills approved, call me and I would be happy, and there will be names of other practitioners who handle these cases the same way. They can help you use magic words and see if you can get it done without their help. I mean, without their being retained. So that's what I would say. But in these situations, if you take away a peace officer's or a firefighter's ability to continue in that career, a very high percentage of them do not have college educations. They've gone into it fairly young. They are making substantially more than the average employee, even, you know, at Amazon. And their hope is to go from, you know, $25 to $30 an hour to go to $13 an hour. And so right there, you're looking at like that 50%. Again, only worth $2,000 per percentage point, but if they're 50% disabled or 35% disabled, you're looking at $70,000 to $100,000. Not very much money, but something at least that's a grub stake that they can move on with things. There is also retraining opportunities, but I've had like maybe one positive experience with retraining, because when an insurance company has a leash around your neck during a retraining process, especially with what we're talking about and the stress that would add, it's not a particularly good thing.
Okay, thank you. Jackie's gonna just say a few more words and I'm gonna wrap it up here.
All right, so I just wanted to speak really quickly about the retraining and the Public Safety Officer Disability Fund. We actually do have some success this year. There's a firefighter who was not able to return to work, and they are paying for his retraining of his school. They're even paying for his parking permits at NNU and stuff like that. And so there's definitely been some great progress. It's just that we need to do some more collaborating and continuing building these alliances. So whether it's like Clinton mentioned, their attorneys group, the alliance that he's going to be shepherding, is willing to do free consultations for people, not necessarily have to pay for a retainer, and they can advise if they need to move forward or not. Our peer support team is also learning as much as they can so that they can also help advise first responders on when they need to contact an attorney and what they could possibly do for other help as well. So anyway, basically I wanted to just do kind of an overview, a summary of the law. Basically, the bottom line is that before July 1st, 2019, a first responder was not able to file a claim for PTSD or post-traumatic stress injury if they did not have a collaborating physical injury with it. They had to have a physical injury. So when Mark Stahl was killed and the other officer was shot, there were 7 officers involved. Only the one that was shot was able to get help for PTSD. The rest were not. They were on their own. That has been the huge shift, is so that now you can actually file a mental. They're actually acknowledging it as a post-traumatic stress injury to the brain, just as much as a broken leg or something like that. So that is huge. There is a sunset clause on it. It does expire in 2023. And I was just speaking with Professional Firefighters of Idaho, Rob Shoplock. He has his thumb on all that. There was an agreement that data would be collected for 3 years, and we will be sending out the data for that. The first year, it was 67% denial for EMS, 75% for fire, 55% for law enforcement, 100% for volunteer first responders. Those rates are way too high, which is a big reason why we're creating these alliances and collaborations. We've also got a video coming out, a 10-part video series. It's about 3 minutes each, with different sections, a section about legal, a section clinician, Ari speaking to other clinicians and reviewing some of those basic tips for clinicians, so that you can watch the whole 30-minute presentation, or you can watch each segment. Like if you've got a client coming in, a first responder next week, you need to review what you need to know for the law, you can go quickly to that video, that 3-minute video segment. So in the next couple of months, that will be out. You can also go to our website and sign up for getting on the email loop so that we can keep you up to date when things are changing. The plan is to go back, not this coming spring, but the following spring of 2023, and get it back through, get that sunset clause on, get it approved. The data does show in the last year that there has been some progress. It went from a, let's see, basically a 64% denial rate across the board to 49%. So it is going down. There has been a lot of education, a lot of work that's been done. I know even like when emergency responders met with Corvell, after they met with them, they started getting claims. They started having a lot more success with getting claims through and stuff like that. So a lot of it is just main education and getting everybody kind of on the same page with that. Let me see, there was a couple other things. Oh, I just wanted to clarify who is included in this law. It does state again in the law who is included, but it's basically law enforcement, corrections, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and volunteer first responders. The volunteer first responders are still at 100% denial, so we're going to be especially working on that, but I am very proud to say that dispatchers are included because the majority of the states in the US with their PTSD workers' comp laws do not include dispatchers, and so that's really awesome. Idaho is definitely helping lead the way in that as well. So, and I would just again say, reach out to any of us, and we're all in this together, and I know we all want to help these first responders and their families get the resources that they need. A lot of maybe our law enforcement are hesitant to go to the workers' comp claims, and so there are other avenues to go down if they don't want to do workers' comp. There's nonprofits that will help pay for their counseling. There's other stuff that they can do. We just want to make sure that these guys get the resources that they need and the help that they need. So thank you guys for your commitment to really helping first responders, understanding their culture, understanding all the demographics of what's going on with the laws, so that you can help them best. So again, thank you, and I'm going to let Lisa end.
Okay, thank you again, everyone, for coming. We have recorded this Zoom call, so we are going to, we had a lot of therapists, obviously, who couldn't get their caseload managed to be here, or even on the Zoom call. So we're going to share this information with them. Ari, that's okay with you, right?
Yep.
And please, I think the most important thing is we need to work together. Everyone has different areas of expertise, and we need to all collaborate together to help, like Jackie said, help the people that have served us, that deserve our help. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Jackie. And we will be in touch with all of you and appreciate your time.